Hello, this is Sheer again, going through more of my camera collection, and here with my only Nikon. This is the Nikkormat FT2, made by Nikon. Now, I believe, I don't know much about Nikon, honestly. I'm not big on the Nikon versus Canon debate, but I just happen to know a little bit more about the Canon line because I have a few more Canons than Nikons. But anyways, I believe Nikkormat, it means it's their consumer line of cameras as opposed to the F series, which was their professional cameras. But anyways, I want to talk about this camera because it has quite a few quirks. Even, dealing with Olympus and Canon and Praktica and all of these, very different manufacturers for, 60s and 70s SLRs. This camera stands out with a bunch of very strange quirks to its operation that I would like to share for anyone else who has just picked up one of these cameras and trying to figure out how to get it to work really fast. And we're going to start with the most important thing, which is the lens mounting and dismounting. And that is because this is a non-AI camera. Now, the Nikon stuff, I don't really know much. But from my research, it seems like Nikon over the years has changed the way the lenses tell the camera what apertures are available. Several times in their history. And this is the earliest type, which is called non-AI. Now, this, I believe, is actually an AI lens, and someone can correct me if they want. And the reason you know it's an AI lens is because there's this ridge that sticks out the back of the lens only on this small portion. It's kind of on the upper right side of the lens. This lip here. And so I believe on newer Nikon cameras, this communicates with some sort of sensor on the edge of the mount, which tells the camera what the maximum aperture of the lens is. However, this is before that, and so to communicate to the light meter in the camera what apertures are available, there's a more complicated system involved. And it's very interesting, and it has a lot to do with the way you mount the lens. So we're going to go through that really fast. The first thing you do is you want the aperture of the lens to be set at 5.6. And that will allow this claw here to mate directly with this pin on the camera body. Now, this has nothing to do with that AI, non-AI. This is how the camera knows what aperture you're currently set at. And it's important to, when you mount the lens, to obviously have the pin go right into the claw. And then what you do is you try to grab the lens so that both the aperture ring and the rest of the lens turns at the same time. So I kind of grab it so that the knurls on the aperture ring and the knurls on the lens are both in my grasp. And then you turn counterclockwise. You'll hear a very sharp click right when you get to the middle. And that's not all you have to do, but now the lens is firmly in place. Now before you do anything else, grab the aperture ring only and rotate it counterclockwise until you get to your largest f-stop number or smallest aperture. Then rotate clockwise to get to your smallest number or your largest aperture. Now, you heard a series of clicks in there, and that is part of the system. See, just through some infernal clockwork mechanism inside this camera, the camera knows that the first aperture movements that you make after you mount the lens will be used to set the light meter. So now it just acts like a normal aperture ring. But that very first install and then counterclockwise and then clockwise sets the light meter. So if you forget to do that, you may have inaccurate light meter readings. Now you can verify the camera has figured it out properly by seeing if this gauge, let me zoom in on that, on the side of the camera near the lens release matches with the maximum aperture of your lens. You can see a tiny little red indicator there. And this is f1.4 lens. So that's about right. I'm assuming, 1.2, 1.4, 1.7 or 1.8, and then your 2.8, et cetera, down to 5.6. So if you see that indicator in the same position as the maximum aperture of the lens you have, you're in good shape. Now to remove the lens, personally I put it back at 5.6, though you don't have to. And then hold down the lens release button here, rotate the whole assembly, again making sure you rotate both the aperture ring and the entire lens over, and then lift out. The reason I keep the lens at 5.6 when I remove it is because then it leaves the pin in the right place for remounting the lens. Again, to mount the lens, insert, rotate, but then make your aperture movements first to go all the way to f16 and then all the way to your maximum aperture. And then you're fine to operate this however you please and verify that it's correct on there, of course. Another bizarre feature of this camera is the way the light meter works. You can see here from the top that one cool thing though is that it has a second light meter reading here. It has a normal light meter match needle inside the viewfinder on the right side, as you can kind of see there, but also has this one on top, which is pretty cool if you're on the tripod. But anyways, to turn on and off this meter, you must actuate the wind. There's this red dot that tells you your light meter is on. So if the crank is in the ready position, out, then the light meter is on. If you close it, light meter turns off. You can see my external needle here turning on and then settling. Another bizarre thing that I still am not used to is that on this inside match needle, I don't know if you can see it. I can't focus on it properly, but the plus, the overexposure, is on the bottom. So the needle goes down when you're overexposed and up when you're underexposed. And that's been confusing me significantly when I'm shooting this camera. I don't know why they couldn't have just flipped that mechanism over, but it's really been frustrating. I don't know. I guess it's just one of those quirks like these other things. Another interesting quirk is removing the back. You don't lift up on this wind knob, but you can't even lift it up. It has the type like this, like the Yashica SLRs, where you push this down with your fingernail and then the back opens. There's just a little latch on the bottom there. Another weird thing is that the depth of field preview is on top here. I think it's more ergonomic if you have it here next to the lens. That way you can use your middle finger to actuate the depth of field, and then your pointer finger to actuate the button. But here, no, you'd have to move your pointer finger back and forth between these two buttons. Another thing, like if your Olympus OM cameras, which I love and I'm very used to, the shutter speed ring is around the lens, but it doesn't, the top isn't where it's set at. This little side dot tells you what shutter speed you're set to. And also on this camera, the shutter speed is actually communicated inside the viewfinder. Again, sorry I can't focus on that in there. But at the very bottom middle of the viewfinder, there are actually, numbered shutter speeds that scroll by. You can see that moving. So that's very handy. Again, so that you can just keep this up to your eye and continue to use the camera without having to, move your fingers to change a dial up here, or even trying to figure out what shutter speed you were at. The final thing is the ISO ASA setting for the meter. It's on the bottom. It's on the bottom of the shutter speed ring. There it is. There's this black dial, which allows you to set your ASA/ISO. To move this black indicator, you have to lift out on this tab on the shutter speed handle, and then slide it back and forth to set. Make sure it locks into a specific ASA after you release this. It's not just floating. Other than that, a pretty standard camera. A lot of things to like though too, especially on being able to get f1.4 lenses for cheap, because I really don't think people are that interested in getting the non-AI lenses and bodies. Also, the specifically this FT2 uses the silver oxide battery instead of the mercury battery, so that's really great for finding, actually being able to find the battery at your local supermarket or drugstore instead of having to get the special replacement non-mercury 625 batteries. So it takes a normal silver oxide battery, which is fantastic. Other than that, everything's pretty normal. Window, winder, the self-timer on the front. Just wanted to let you know about those just few quirks so that if you ever pick up one of these cameras, you can more easily transition to shooting it. Other than that, it's a pretty great camera, but enough talking about it. It's time to go out there and shoot. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.